In this video, I just want to talk you through some changes that I made to illustrate some different possibilities with this block break framework. Basically, what I did is I turned it into a little game where you have a jumping ball. Remember, these are not super sophisticated games. Don't go crazy trying to make something that's, does everything. Start with something simple. If you get something simple working, then add some complexity and some interest to it. So anyway, you have your ball down here, and when I start it, I'm gonna go back and forth, but I've disabled the up and down keys, and instead I put like a little jump function. I also changed the way that the blocks move. Oh, this is gonna be the easiest in the world. So all I have to do is run into the pink. It chooses that automatically. Okay, I win. Hopefully, sometimes it's a little bit more challenging than that. Let's run it again real quick, and let's see if I get seriously. It just gave me the pink right next to me again. Okay, now the pink's at least not right next to me. All right, now, so I got all these blocks moving up and down, getting in my way. And if I press the space bar, it jumps. Notice this jump's pretty primitive. It just goes up and down at a fixed rate. There's no reflection of realistic gravity in there, which is actually a little trickier. If you want to do some research and figure out how to use that, you can. What I gave you is a simpler version where it just goes kind of straight up and straight down or in a direction that I jump. So let me try to press the space bar and jump over that thing. There we go. And then I can kind of sneak under these guys and get to my pink block eventually, right? Oh, can go back. Anyway, you guys are confident I can eventually get there. So this all goes to show you, you can just do some simple changes to make this work. It really isn't that big of a deal what I changed, and you'll see the code. But let me take you through some of it, starting with the most important things. Okay, I added this class called Jumping Ball, which is my character. It's an ellipse 2D dot double, kind of a weird constructor, but this is what we've been making the balls out of when we want to make them objects. If you're just painting a ball, you can just do an oval and fill an oval, but to make it an object, we're going to use ellipse 2D dot double. Give it positions, X, Y, width, and a height. This part is crucial. I have this variable jumping because I want to keep track of at any given second if it's jumping or not. And also I have this jump progress, which tells me how much of the jump I have finished. So I'm going to by default start at that with 0, and then as a mid jump, I can work my way through that. Most of what's in here is pretty easy and self-explanatory, like setters and getters, but the main method here is this jump. So if I come into jump and I'm not currently jumping, so that means I'm initiating a jump, and that's a little different. First, I'm going to set the height, which comes from a parameter. So I can jump 10 pixels high or 100 pixels high. I set my height here, set my progress to 0. So when I get all the way to the number of pixels that I want, then I'm going to start coming back down. And now I change my jumping flag to true. So it's only going to go to this part one time in the process of the jump call. Now I'm going to increment my jump progress. So now I know I'm a little farther along in the process of jumping. My X direction will be I'm either going forward, backward, or not at all. So if I'm like jumping, for example, if I jump to the left, I'm going to continue moving to the left as I'm jumping. Now, if the jump progress is less than my jump height, so I haven't reached my full jump height, I'm subtracting the Y value. This takes some getting used to, and I mess up on this sometimes, but when you're going up on the screen, your Y value is getting less. So that's what's going on here. This is the up part of the jump. Then later is my down part of the jump when I've surpassed the height and I'm going towards twice the height. That's I'm going to add to my Y values, which brings me back down toward the bottom of the screen. And if I get everything done, now my jumping state goes back to false. And lastly, I set my new XY position based on the X and Y calculated stuff up here. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward. You can dig into the guts of it. And let me show you on the block break side of things, how I dig in. So a couple things. You notice my block barriers were a little different. I did something different here. I don't want to talk about it too much. It's not the main thing I'm focusing on, but this is the code where I changed how those blocks behave. I also, when I was doing this, I noticed some problems with earlier version of Wiggle Block that weren't behaving exactly like I wanted to. I built some levels of flexibility in there that didn't quite work. So I would ask you that you reinstall, so recompile the new Wiggle Block that I gave you if you're going to try to use this. Anyway, it makes a smaller array and it varies. Basically, this is what they call the wiggle length, how far they go is going to be dependent on their position. So that's a little bit more. You could also randomize that. There's a lot of stuff you could do with that to make that more interesting behavior. Um, then, what's different? Let's look at the jump code because that's the really interesting stuff that's different. And it's actually pretty simple, right? Because if I if I'm not jumping and I find out if the ball is jumping by calling its is jumping method. So if I'm not jumping, this stuff just handles like I do. I get the X value and increment it, or I get the Y value and increment it. Pretty basic movement. Looks a little complicated. I put a lot in one line, but as you sort through that, it's pretty simple. I'm just getting an X or Y value and adding one or subtracting one to it. Then here, this is the main guts of calling the jump. So if I'm jumping to the right, I'm going to jump with a height of 60 and 1 means that positive 1 x direction. That means I'm going to go one more to the right each time I jump, effectively going up at a 45-degree angle. If I'm going left, I'm going to go -1 on the x direction each time I go. And otherwise, I just go straight up and down. That's basically it. Though look at this here. I have a jump or is jumping. The jump is basically comes from a key listener, right? That's important. I've added a space bar to listen for a jump. So just like the other ones, we go down to that part of the code. These guys are just sitting around here waiting, and my space bar is 32. So if I have a pressed space bar event, I set jump equal to true. If I release that, it says false. But that's basically measures if a jump has been initiated. The is jumping, which is connected to the the jumping ball class, is what detects not if the key has been pressed, but if you're currently in the process of jumping. So take a look at the code, digest this. You can incorporate any of this if you want to into your own design, or you can ask me questions about it. But those are the basics, and I hope that helps point you in the right direction. Thank you.